Get out a piece of paper to take notes on. It should be a blank piece of paper. You should also get out your 10.3 guided reading worksheet.
Never mind, Connor.
Oh, I did it. I need you to come in early to do that. Oh,
I did.
so did I.
I didn't even study
Michael, get out your stuff. Today, at the end of class, you should be able to answer these 3 questions. You're going to write them on the board, and they will be your exit slip for the day.
Why do you always do
Get out a blank piece of paper and write down these 3 questions.
Wait, do we have to do the bell work?
No, not today.
Because you're very nice.
That's long ago. No, it's only
I think you can. You learned any other reason.
I'm doing med 15 for
Math 25 is better.
No, it's not. I have med 25.
I have 15.
All right, you should be writing, Michael, blank piece of paper.
I need a. Wait, can I use the.
I'm just showing off on
so
the
I'm not
notes.
wasting paper?
Because I'm the one that's actually good.
I can't see Can I use the back of this sheet? Because you'll give us a.
Yep, you can.
Can we get back?
Yeah, you can show it to me and that'll be fine.
2 plus.
The
X
killers.
stop.
Stop it.
Wait, do we have to answer these or just write the questions down?
At the end of the day, this will be your exit slip.
So at 3:17, you're not going to allow us to leave the building at 3:17 unless we have it. Why were many Americans
You have no reason not to have an answer at the end of class.
Is it bad?
Yep. I'll make you stay here until you have the answer.
What is that?
What's the name?
It comes up.
Two comes up. Two comes up.
What's your goal for the day today?
What?
Michael.
What's the last word today?
The last word is war and odds.
War and Hawks. At least imagine a hawk carrying an axe.
My first question for you guys is, what is foreign policy? Right, who needs more time to write down these questions?
Oh, I did.
All right. It's your exit slip. But you answer them as I go through class today.
Let's play Jeopardy.
Oh, that would be fun.
Let's play American History Jeopardy. That would be really fun.
I'll see if I can remember.
Let's go kill aliens.
Easiest one.
Number 2. What's the word? Let's say.
What do I say?
You should go.
American history.
Does everybody have it done?
No, first person shooter.
Yes.
Oh, shoot, my gun down. I already know it.
All right, my first question for you guys is, what is foreign policy? Dylan.
Agreements that foreign countries agree to keep.
No, that would be an alliance. Everett.
They are
Problems that have to do with, that aren't based in America, for example, the situation, are not from the home country.
Sort of.
Like we had problems with Britain during the revolution.
That would be a foreign problem, not a foreign policy. Alyssa?
Isn't it like the policy where you have to have relationships with other countries and everything?
Closer. Okay, so remember the acceptable use of computers policy that you guys read and signed?
Sure.
A policy is like rules or a method. So when we talk about foreign policy, specifically Thomas Jefferson's foreign policy, we're talking about how he dealt with foreign countries and foreign problems. And that is one of the themes of the chapter. Rhett?
Never mind.
All right. So you should have your 10.3 reading worksheet out. And my first question is, why did Jefferson advise against entangling alliances? I'm going to call on Michael.
Because that would get us into more wars.
More wars, yep, good. And what did he want to focus on instead of those?
Our own country.
Our own country, yeah.
Yep, and what was the phrase he used in the book?
He says to make a lot of alliances, but no entangling alliances or whatever.
When he's talking about at home, he's talking about domestic concerns.
Oh.
Domestic means at home. So your foreign policy is how you deal with other countries. Your domestic policy is how you deal with problems within your own country. And what did we talk about yesterday about note-taking? What were the key things I said?
Take a long.
Write as much as you can.
Write as much as you can, and don't just write the basic facts. Make connections. Today would be a good time to practice that.
Wait, foreign policy is with all the countries, domestic is with your own?
Yep, domestic means at home. Like, this is a kind of sad example, but I see the words domestic violence a lot. Who's ever seen a commercial about that? That means violence within the home. Yep. It's a sad example, but it's correct. So next, I'm going to call on Ella. Why was the United States likely to have conflicts with other nations?
Because they're going to get more land and exploring.
Oh, that's a good answer for conflicts with nations that were in North America. Like, remember the Lewis and Clark map that I had right here? Yeah. But I'm talking about conflicts with England and France that had to do with what was going on in the Atlantic Ocean. And Everett.
Because their country was based a lot of the people based their businesses off trade.
Trade, perfect. Trade will sometimes lead to problems. And which two nations in Europe are almost always at war?
Britain or Great Britain.
Yep, England and France. And what's going on right now is that England and France are at war, and neither of them are happy that the United States is supplying their enemy with supplies. So who can tell me what Britain did that enraged Americans? Someone who hasn't answered yet. James.
They blocked the ports and took sailors as hostages.
Yes. Blockade is a good vocabulary word. A blockade is when you put your country's ships in front of a port so that no other ships who are going to trade goods can make it there. So France has a port on the ocean, and Britain has put its ships in front of it so no American ships can get to France. And what was another thing that Britain did? It starts with an I.
Invade.
Impressment.
Impressment. This is a word that you will need to be able to define. Ethan, can you tell me what impressment is?
No, I don't think so. But it said in the book, it was like, what the British, they interfered with the U.S. trade by oppressing or kidnapping sailors.
Good, kidnapping sailors. And I'm going to read a part about impressment from the teacher's guide that said it quite well. When Britain impressed sailors from American ships, it claimed to take only British subjects, ignoring the fact that many native-born Britons had become naturalized American citizens. Britain adopted its policy of impressment to fill its great need for sailors in the Royal Navy. So Britain is short on sailors, and they know that some of their sailors have ran away and joined American sailing crews because they have better pay and better conditions. So the British ships come alongside the American ships. They say, let us come on board or we will sink you. They come on board and they take the British citizens that join the American ships. The problem is they aren't just taking British-born sailors. They're also taking Americans, people who grew up in Virginia, in New York. And who knows how many American sailors were kidnapped within, yeah, Vanessa?
6,000.
Yep,
right?
6,000. In the first decade, between 1803 and 1812, 6,000 American sailors were kidnapped. That's a big deal. Peyton.
What does blockade mean again?
Blockade. Blockade is when your country puts a lot of ships in between your enemy's port and the ships that are trying to trade with your enemy. So the American ships are headed towards France. They're trying to get to the French port so they can trade their goods to France, but the British ships are in the way, blocking them, not allowing them in. So who can tell me the two reasons that America was calling for war against Britain? Everett.
Saw that the British were helping the Native Americans in the West, so they were afraid that they were going to fight.
Excellent. We are going to get to the struggle in the West and the Native Americans pretty soon. But first, who do you think is mad about the blockade?
American.
Traders.
American merchants. The people who are growing tobacco and rice and cotton aren't making as much money because of the British blockade. So they're telling Jefferson that he should ask Congress for a declaration of war. So remember our Constitution unit? The president can't declare war, but he can suggest it to Congress. So the traders are mad, and the sailors are mad because they could be kidnapped. Every day they have the risk of being kidnapped. So they're telling Jefferson to tell Congress to declare war. And what does Jefferson do instead?
Oh, he does that thingy that says no more trading with Britain.
Yes. Another word that you need to know. It's embargo. Write this definition down. Embargo means stopping trade with foreign nations.
Was Tecumseh, was he the one that's related to Sacagawea?
No, he's not. We'll get to him later. You'll be able to answer this at the end of the day.
I can remember.
And Jefferson called this strategy of cutting off trade with foreign countries peaceable coercion. Does anyone know what coercion means? Yeah, everyone.
Fighting, peaceful fighting, is that?
Fighting? Close. Coercion means a threat.
How come you have a peaceful threat?
It's a threat that doesn't involve war. Jefferson doesn't want to put American lives on the line. He doesn't want to start a big war where the United States is going to have to spend a lot of money. So he thinks that by stopping trade with Britain and France, they are going to begin to respect American ships. They're going to hurt so badly from not being able to trade with us that they're going to listen to what we say.
Yeah. No.
So he should have peaceful coercion and then threat written down. And we should have peaceful coercion was cutting off trade instead of going to war.
Wait, so is the threat of cutting off trade?
Yep. The threat is, we won't trade with you until you stop the blockade and stop kidnapping or impressing our soldiers.
So how would they get the message?
Same way that they sent messages back then, you know, letters on ships.
So they'd have to put the lives of the ships that sent the message in danger?
Or they could just have the British ships give them a message and so that.
Or they could
But
stick
when
it in
you
a bottle
when
and toss
you give
it
it
out.
to them, wouldn't they just attack you and then?
If they did that, they were starting a war in which they're basically fighting Napoleon in Europe.
Yeah, that's a good question. Jefferson was more concerned about the many American ships that were under attack than the one ship with the message.
I'd hate to get ship.
It'd be kind of scary.
Just stick
Yeah,
it in a
like
bottle and
7
throw it out to
days.
the sea and be done with it.
Wasn't it 300 where they cut the guy's head off because he declared war or whatever? What movie was that?
Yep, but this is American history, not ancient history.
Well, they just
Wait till
chopped
high
his head
school.
off.
There's ancient history in
The-
high school?
Hopefully, you'll take Western Civ. So,
Oh.
this Embargo Act, remember, embargo means cutting off trade with foreign nations, was passed in 1807. And who can tell me what this act did? Like, not what it was, but what actually happened. Dylan.
And that actually ended up making Americans mad because they also couldn't trade now, which meant they were stuck, but plus British and French weren't much affected with it because they had still other European countries to trade with.
Excellent. Dylan nailed it. This act did not hurt the British or French. It ended up hurting the American traders. And one of the Americans said, this embargo act was like cutting your throat to stop a nosebleed. Impressment was the nosebleed. It was a problem, but it wasn't as big as the bigger problem of not being able to trade. So remember how the Alien and Sedition Acts made John Adams unpopular? The Embargo Act of 1807 made Jefferson
Made TJ.
very unpopular. You might want to write that down. And who's ever heard the word sanctions before?
Heard it.
Ahmad, can you tell me what it means?
Not letting a certain country trade.
Yes. And the United States still uses sanctions today.
Like with Cuba?
With Cuba? Yep. Who are some nations that you think the United States wants to threaten
What
with
is
no
a
trade?
sanction? I didn't hear.
A sanction is just like the embargo. It means we're not going to trade with you unless you do what we want. Dylan.
Russia.
Russia. Good one. Everett.
Syria because they're making nuclear weapons.
Yep. Syria. Iraq.
The people over there, it's like by Asia and all the Kazakhstan and all those places.
Yep. Basically, if a nation like Syria is doing things like killing its own citizens and the United States wants it to stop, before they go to war or make the threat of war, they'll make the threat of not trading with Syria. They'll say, if we don't stop hearing these reports of you killing your own citizens and bad things that your government is doing, we will not trade with your country, and your country's economy is going to suffer. So right here, I have a list that I found on treasury.gov that can tell you about the current sanctions. And there are different rules. Most of the time, it's we will not trade with you. And if any U.S. company...
So those dates, that's when they started not trading with like Belarus or whatever?
The dates are when the programs were last updated.
Oh.
Let's say the United States is angry at Russia for what's going on in the Ukraine. If Russia meets some of our demands and backs off a little bit, we will give them more trade to help nudge them in the right direction. Does anyone have any questions about sanctions?
How many are there?
I'll scroll down.
North Korea, of course.
Yep. I think North Korea's been on the sanction list for quite a while.
But then Dennis Rodman decided to go have a party with their leader.
So the Embargo Act was a good idea because we don't want war, but it ended up hurting American trade and American farmers more than the English and French. So by now, you should have an answer to question number 1. You could write down, Britain was impressing or kidnapping American sailors. And yeah, I'll give you a little bit to write that down.
Does North Dakota have the most wheat made in the country?
I'm not sure if we're number 1, but we're definitely high up on the list.
Wait, for what?
Gas though, right?
For oil,
Yeah.
right now, we're either the largest or second largest oil producer, because there's a lot of
Not the other
oil.
one? Is there
Alaska. Alaska has a lot of oil too.
Britain was casting soldiers. What else?
Britain was capturing
Did you
or
write
oppressing
this?
soldiers. Yep, this is your answer to the first part of your exercise. And there was also a blockade. And I should have also mentioned that the French were also troubling the Americans.
Because they said if you follow the British rules, then they're going to attack, and if we follow the French rules, the British will attack.
Excellent.
That's
The British were telling the American ships, you cannot trade with France. And France said, Americans, if you listen to Britain, then we are going to start attacking your ships. You can write down, the French were also threatening to attack American ships. Yeah, Dylan?
Present day, who do we have a better relationship, French or British?
British, because we have the most in common with the British and their
Didn't we
government.
just break something off with the French, like we got kind of in an argument or something?
I'm not sure. I know that a lot of French newspapers complain about Americans. And yeah, I know Britain has been the United States' best ally for most of the last century.
Wait, why are they complaining about?
Centuries, 100 years, right?
Yep.
Wait, what did France do?
France threatened to attack American ships if they would follow the British rules. And the British rules were don't trade with the French. So open up in your textbook to page 312. Next we're going to talk about Tecumseh.
Right to the page.
finger backwards and then spin this one forwards instead of making a pattern like this.
I did not know that. I learned something new every day. All right, who remembers the math assignment and what were the 4 states that were added after the first 13 states? James?
Vermont,
Vermont, that's one.
Tennessee, Ohio,
Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Good. So Ohio, right here, has become a state. And now that it's a state, more and more white settlers are moving into it. Who do you think is mad at this?
Native.
The Native Americans. When the white settlers first started coming in, there weren't very many of them. They weren't chopping down all the trees, they weren't starting farms everywhere, they weren't annoying with the hunting grounds. But by this point, there have been thousands of white settlers coming in to Ohio and Indiana, which was about to become a state. So the Native Americans are starting to not be able to hunt. They're starting to get upset. And hey, listen up, guys. This is question number 2. I'll point to it again. So Tecumseh is a Native American chief who is going to try to stop this westward expansion. And from chapter 9, who remembers the battle that took place in the Northwest Territory? Ethan?
No, I didn't know. I was just gonna say for number 2, it says that he tried to stop the loss of their land or whatever.
Good.
Is that what you did?
Yep, you could write that down.
Here's that what?
Tecumseh tried to stop
The loss of Native
the
American.
loss of Native American land by going to war against the
He was
whites.
a Native American chief.
Vanessa knows the answer. What was the battle?
The Battle of Fallen Timbers.
Yep, the Battle of Fallen Timbers. That was the point. Once the Native Americans lost that battle, more and more white settlers were pouring into the Northwest Territory, Ohio and Indiana. So I have a writing assignment for you to do right now. And we're going to do something called role play, where you are going to pretend that you are Tecumseh, and you are going to write a speech. So pretend that you're
I wanna be George
Tecumseh
Washington.
speaking to other Native Americans. You're going to use page 312 as your guide. I want you to write at least 5 sentences. So you're writing this from his point of view. And in this speech, you need to say why Tecumseh is upset and what he wants his people to do.
Is this going next to flip 2?
Yep.
Okay.
5 sentences.
So what did he?
Wait, so who's the other person? One person's Tecumseh, and then who's the other one?
You are writing as if you are Tecumseh. You could start out saying, I, Tecumseh, am upset because, and then use page 312 to understand what he was at.
Oh, you're right. It's gonna be
Jaden? Yep, that's fine. I go.
Back in like that time, was it legal to grow hemp or like marijuana?
Remember the George Washington video where he grew hemp? He used it as rope.
Oh, okay.
Yep, but you need to be on task now.
I was just wondering if they grow up tobacco and all that stuff.
So you say why you're mad?
Yep, begin by explaining, this is why I'm mad, and then say, this is what I think we should do about it.
You should talk like you are the Indian or Native Americans.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Why did you say I am mad because and
Oh, I want you to talk with this one too, but I find it like easy for English.
oh no.
Yeah, I was like, that'd be a little bit. Yeah, Alyssa?
No, this was the Battle Call Holders, was that the game on here that you didn't want to lose?
Yep, that's when the Westerners kicked the Native Americans out of Ohio, Indiana. That's when they really.
So he doesn't want the Battle Call Holders to happen again?
No, this has already happened, and it already broke the Native Americans' power. So now that more and more Westerners are coming in, let's try to get them here. That's how I'll
Okay.
Warhawks are the people that want war, right?
Yep. Yeah, you can. Yep,
No.
we'll talk about them.
The peace hawks want war.
No, peace dogs.
The Peace Eagles are Americans. The Peace Eagles are Americans.
Yeah, but just do something. Okay, let me read your speech. Everett, let me read your speech. I want to know how motivating it is.
You're so very, and taking my land and claiming it for themselves. As the chief of my tribe, I think.
All right, take one more minute to wrap it up, guys.
Together we will kill the white settlers and then worship our very, very black God after our return.
They found it serious with this.
I am serious, but that's his name. Musa.
But they don't believe that it's their land, they believe it's everyone's land.
I think R is in Pine Area.
I'm actually going to talk about how the Native Americans believed that the land belonged to their children. Interesting way of looking at it,
Well,
right?
because they were there first, they were there longer.
They said,
They're kind of their first.
we are borrowing the land from our children. In other words, if we use it up and destroy it, then our children don't get it. That-
Don't they believe that it's everyone's land?
Life is similar to broken promises. To the time period, you're only listening.
You weren't made by two people, man and woman. You were made by broken pieces.
Robert.
Oh, was it?
This lady wants to bless.
This is Johnson.
Your children. So,
Where are the,
why do we fight
like,
secret?
extra packet?
Can you rate it? You can put them up online. All right. Does anyone want to read their speech? Do I have a volunteer?
Yeah.
Ahmad.
I know.
Guys, listen up. Ahmad is going to talk now.
I see it.
Listen to your peers read and see if there's anything that you can add to your answer and your essence. Go for it, Ahmad.
I am so very, very, very mad at the whites for killing my people and taking my children's land and claiming it for themselves. As the chief of my tribe, I think we should kill it. We must gather other tribes to join us. Together we will kill the white settlers and then worship our very, very black God after the betrayal.
Our very, very.
Then you almost
Referring to yours.
I like that. Ahmad brought up an interesting point. The Native Americans, shh, listen up. The Native Americans believed we borrow the land from our children. What do you think they meant by that? Peyton.
Oh, no, never mind. I had another question.
Do it.
That our land will someday belong to their children, so they want to make sure they're keeping it good for their children.
Yep, so we should take good care of it. In other words, if we chop down all the trees, there won't be a forest for them.
Yeah, then they won't be able to chop down any trees.
Does somebody else want to read now? Do it.
Okay.
Inspire me to fight God.
Go for it.
I am Tecumseh, or whatever his name is.
Tecumseh.
Yeah, we who have rightly been here for eons are having our children's land taken away by the white men. We should rise up against this threat to our culture and beliefs. This is our children's land. We should unite to defend it, because divided we will be defeated.
Stop screaming, buddy.
No! Okay, I'm fired up!
That would make me scared.
The white men only have one advantage. That is that they are completely united. Let us rise up and fight for our sacred land.
Good. So,
Dylan, you look like a man. You're not king.
Dylan needs to volunteer.
I'm manly because I'm
Listen up. Attention.
Yeah, and then you did the
Peyton. I'm talking. Alright, so from those speeches, what are you guys going to write down for number 2?
That a Native American chief who tried to stop the Western expansion,
Yep, he tried to stop it by doing what?
killing all the whites.
No. Something very important. There were many Indian tribes. Yes.
Unite them and
Yep,
then kill
just
all the
raise your
whites.
hand next time. To unite the tribes. So Tecumseh is trying to unite all the Native American tribes. Now, do you think the white settlers would be able to defeat the tribes, like if they're just fighting one at a time?
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if Tecumseh unites all of the tribes, which are going to outnumber the United States settlers, then he will probably be successful. And also, who is still in Canada at this point? British. And Canada is pretty close to Ohio and Indiana. So the British might see the Native Americans united and agree to help them. And that would be a big problem for the
But
United
weren't they
States.
already tried?
So what happens in the Battle of Tippecanoe?
Tippecanoe.
That's what it's called. What happens in the Battle of Tippecanoe?
Tipped over.
Everett.
Well, Tecumseh was out recruiting Native Americans for this army. They were attacked. The army was attacked and lost. And the army was defeated.
So Tippecanoe, Peyton, listen up. Tippecanoe is the battle where the settlers in Indiana and Ohio defeat the Native American tribes. And it's a really harsh blow to the Native Americans. They end up fleeing to Canada.
What's a blow?
Blow, like defeated.
No, what happened to the Native Americans?
They were defeated in the Battle of Tippecanoe, and they had to go to Canada.
We don't fight like British, though. We don't just line up and shoot, right?
Correct. It was different by this time. But you need to know that the British welcomed Tecumseh and the Native Americans. Now, what do you think that is going to, or how do you think that's going to make Americans feel?
mad because British will help them.
Yep. So the United States is even more angry at the British now. Which brings us to our last question of the day. First of all, who is a war hawk?
Somebody who believes that they should.
Raise your hand. Raise your hand. James.
A person who favors a decent wants to carry out foreign policy.
Good. We talked about foreign policy, and we talked about peaceful coercion. Did Jefferson's peaceful threat work? No. So now, in Congress, there are people who are saying the embargo did not work out very well. We still have a big problem of impressment. Our sailors are still being kidnapped, and we can't trade. We think it's time for war. And who's seen a hawk before?
They're annoying to like.
And what does a hawk represent?
It's just a hawk.
Glasses.
Black Hawk
Bird
Down.
of war. A bird of prey. A hawk is a bird that kills other smaller animals. And you'll learn about the Vietnam War when you're in high school. In that war, the people who supported the war were called the Hawks, and the people who were against the war were called the Ducks. So, we still have a minute and a half left. So with the time you have left,
Yes, Master.
write the 3 reasons that Americans favored war with the British.
Just 3?
Yep.
I think
And I will point to them. And finally, helping the Native Americans.
Okay, so why did people want? Why did people want to do a hot?
The British aid
3 reasons.
Americans.
Okay.
The British were still impressing American soldiers.
It says
They weren't able
I know I have it.
to make money off of trade. And the British were giving Native Americans refuge in Canada. All right, once your exit slip is done, raise your hand and I'll come over and take a look at it. I see you have it there. Good.
I'm done.
I can't read that very well, but I'm glad you wrote a lot. Good.
And then you come up on that. Charlie, have you seen him, guys?
3, 2, 1.
I didn't hear. I forgot.
Dude, come on, you got it.
Okay, yeah.
You can go.
Ice cream.
I know, he's like.
Guys, I'm very happy with how many notes you're taking. You're writing down more than you usually do.
So I asked him, why must we fight separate?
You guys can go.
Against this that threatens all of us. I said here that we fight as one. So I asked one person.
No homework time, Mr. Johnson?
No, I'm doing it, Mr.